Welcome back. Chapter 27 of Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. If you watched the last video, you know where we are, so I'm just going to get right into it. Because I want to get as much done as I can as quickly as possible. Alrighty. Chapter 27. With no greater events than these in the Longbourn family, and otherwise diversified by little beyond the walks to Meryton, less often interrupted by zombies on the account of the hardened earth of winter, did January and February pass away. March was to take Elizabeth to Hunsford. She had not at first thought very seriously of going thither, but Charlotte, she soon found, was struggling to keep the last of her senses, and Elizabeth thought it an appropriate tribute to their former friendship to see her one last time. She found that absence as well as pity had also weakened her disgust of Mr. Collins. The journey would moreover give her a peep at Jane, and, in short, as time drew near, she would soon be very sorry for any delay. Everything, however, went on smoothly and was finally settled. She was to accompany Sir William and his second daughter. The improvement of spending a night in London was added in time, and the plan became as perfect as a plan could be. The farewell between herself and Mr. Wickham was perfectly friendly, on his side even more. His present pursuit could not make him forget that Elizabeth had been the first to excite and to deserve his attention, the first to listen and to pity, the first to be admired. Her fellow travelers the next day were not of a kind to make her think him any less agreeable. Sir William Lucas and his daughter Maria, a good-humored girl, but as empty-headed and untrained as himself, had nothing to say that could be worth hearing, and were listened to with about as much delight as the rattle of the chaise. It was a journey of only 24 miles, and they began it so early as to be in Section 6 East by noon. The coachman, as was the custom on trips to town, had employed 2 young men from Meryton to ride beside him with muskets. This was done in spite of the fact that Elizabeth herself was fully armed and more than capable of defending them should they encounter any unpleasantness. When they were but 3 miles from London, and Sir William was prattling on about the particulars of his knighthood for the second time in as many hours, the chaise lurched to a halt. The suddenness of this was enough to send Maria flying from one side of the carriage to the other, and was promptly followed by frightened shouts and the crack of powder outside. Had Elizabeth not been graced with steady nerves and the fortitude of years in combat, she might have gasped upon pulling back one of the curtains, for there were no less than 100 unmentionables surrounding them on all sides. Oh my gosh, this is getting juicy. Oh my goodness. All the zombies everywhere. One of the musket men had been dragged off the chaise and was being devoured, while the other 2 living men fired clumsily into the crowd as the hands of the dead pulled at their pant legs. Elizabeth grabbed her brown Bess and katana sword and told Sir William and Maria to remain as they were. She kicked open the door and sprang atop the coach. From here, Elizabeth could appreciate the full measure of their predicament, for rather than 100 unmentionables, she now perceived no less than twice that number. The coachman's leg was in possession of several zombies who were quite close to getting their teeth on his ankle. Seeing no alternative, Elizabeth brought her sword down upon his thigh, amputating the leg, but saving the man. She picked him up with one arm and lowered him onto the couch, when he fainted as blood poured forth from his new stump. Sadly, this action prevented her from saving the second musket man, who had been pulled from his perch. He screamed as the dreadfuls held him down, and they began to tear organs from his living belly and feast upon them. The zombies next turned their attention to the terrified horses. Elizabeth knew that she and the present party were all doomed to slow deaths if the horses should fall into Satan's hands. So she sprang skyward, firing her musket as she flew through the air, her bullets penetrating the heads of several unmentionables. She landed on her feet beside one of the horses, and with her sword began cutting down the attackers with all grace of Aphrodite and the ruthlessness of Herod. Her feet, fists, and blade were too swift for the clumsy horde, and they began to retreat. Seeing her chance, Elizabeth sheathed her katana, sprang into the driver's box, and grabbed the reins. Wait, okay, so that's interesting. I didn't know that, but apparently in this universe, where the zombies are, they have enough wherewithal and mindfulness to retreat from death. So they're not mindless, right? I mean, That's what I'm led to believe right here. Interesting nonetheless. Where was I? Rather, the zombies had already begun to regroup as she cracked the coachman's whip, driving the horses forward and carrying them down the road at a rather unsafe speed until she was satisfied that the danger had passed. Shortly thereafter, they approached the southern face of London's wall. Though she had once walked upon China's Great Wall, Elizabeth was nonetheless but impressed whenever she had occasion to lay eyes upon the Britain's Barrier. Britain's Barrier, it's all capitalized. That's funny. Considered alone, each section offered little to boast of. The wall was similar in height and appearance to that of many older castles and punctuated by the occasional gorge tower or cannon port. But considered as a whole, the wall was so massive as to defy the notions of what was possible with human hands. Elizabeth brought the carriage to a halt at the Southern Guard Tower. A dozen or more chaises were stopped ahead of them, waiting as the guards searched for contraband and made certain that none of the passengers showed signs of the strange plague. Sir William poked his head out and informed Elizabeth that the coachman had died, and asked if she thought it appropriate to leave his body beside the road. Oof, that's tough. As they drove to Mr. Gardner's door, Jane was at a drawing room window watching their arrival. When they entered the passage, she was there to welcome them, surprised by the sight of Elizabeth in the driver's box. Elizabeth's spirits lifted at the sight of her sister, who looked as healthful and lovely as ever. She relayed the details of their unhappy journey as swiftly as she could, and begged they speak no more of it, except to say that she had never seen such a number of unmentionables together in the country, and wondered why so many would attack a single chaise. The day passed most pleasantly away. The morning in bustle and shopping, and the evening at one of the theatres. Elizabeth then contrived to sit by her aunt. Their first object was her sister, and she was more grieved than astonished to hear, in reply to her minute inquiries, that though Jane always struggled to support her spirits, there were periods of dejection. It was reasonable, however, to hope that they would not continue long. Mrs. Gardner gave her the particulars also of Miss Bingley's visit in Section 6, and repeated conversations occurring at different times between Jane and herself, which proved that the former had, from her heart, given up the acquaintance. That's good. Get rid of dead weight friends, fair weather friends, we don't need them. If they ain't raising you up, queen, they ain't worth it in your life. You know what I'm saying? Mrs. Gardner then railed her niece on Wickham's desertion, and complimented her on bearing it so well. "But, my dear Elizabeth," she added, "what sort of girl is this new object of his affections? I should be sorry to think of our friend Mercenary." "Pray, my dear aunt, what is the difference in matrimonial affairs between the mercenary and the prudent motive? Last Christmas you were afraid of his marrying me, because it would be imprudent, and now, because he is trying to get a girl with only £10,000, you think him a mercenary." Think him mercenary. If you will only tell me what sort of girl she is, I shall know what to think. She is a very good kind of girl, I believe. I know no harm of her. Before they were separated by the conclusion of the play, Elizabeth had the unexpected happiness of an invitation to accompany her uncle and aunt in a tour of pleasure, which they proposed taking in the summer. "We've not determined how far it shall carry us," said Mrs. Gardner, "but perhaps to the lakes. We're really going to go out while there's hordes of zombies? Man, this is just like, not going to say it's comparable to today, but it's when things are locked down, people are going out nonetheless. Just saying." No scheme could have been more agreeable to Elizabeth, and her acceptance of the invitation was most ready and grateful. "My dear aunt," she rapturously cried, "what delightful, what felicity! What delight, what felicity! You give me fresh life and vigor. Adieu to disappointment and spleen. What are young men to rocks and mountains? Oh, what honors of mountain-top sparring we shall spend! How many bucks we shall fell, with nothing more than our daggers and swiftness of foot! Oh, how we will please Buddha by communing with the earth." Wow, interesting. Chapter 28. Every object in the next day's journey was new and interesting to Elizabeth. With a new coachman and twice their original number of musketmen, they hastened to Hunsford. Once arrived, their journey happily uneventful. Every eye was in search of the parsonage, and every turning expected to bring it into view. Rosings Park was their boundary on one side. Elizabeth smiled at the recollection of all that she had heard of its inhabitants. Yes. At length the parsonage was discernible. The garden sloping to the road was the house standing in it, the green pales and the laurel hedge. Everything declared they were arriving. Elizabeth felt at once relaxed, for there had been no reports of zombies in Hunsford for years. Many attributed this to the presence of Lady Catherine, so great a slayer that the stricken dared not venture too close to her home. Mr. Collins and Charlotte appeared at the door, and the carriage stopped at the small gate which led by a short gravel walk to the house. Amidst the nods and smiles of the whole party, in a moment they were all out of the chaise, rejoicing at the sight of each other. But when Mrs. Collins welcomed Elizabeth, the latter was greatly distressed by the appearance of the former. It had been months since she had seen Charlotte, and kind months they had not been, for her friend's skin was now quite grey and marked with sores, and her speech appallingly laboured. That none of the others noticed this, Elizabeth attributed to their stupidity, particularly Mr. Collins, who apparently had no idea that his wife was 3/4 dead. That's all I can say is just, what? I mean, come on, man. You're not paying enough attention. They were taken into the house. As soon as they were in the parlour, Mr. Collins welcomed them a second time with ostentatious formality to his humble abode, and punctually repeated all his wife's offers of refreshment. Elizabeth was prepared to see him in his glory, and she could not help in fancying that in displaying the good proportion of the room in aspect and its furniture, he addressed himself particularly to her, as if wishing to make her feel what she had lost in refusing him. But though everything seemed neat and comfortable, she was not able to gratify him by any sigh of repentance. After sitting long enough to admire every article of furniture in the room, Mr. Collins invited them to take a stroll in the garden. To work in this garden was one of his most respectable pleasures, and Elizabeth admired Charlotte's efforts to talk of healthfulness of the exercise, even though it was quite difficult to understand her. From his garden, Mr. Collins would have led them round his 2 meadows, but the ladies, not having shoes to enter the remains of From his garden, Mr. Collins would have led them round his 2 meadows, but the ladies, not having shoes to encounter the remains of a white frost, turned back, and while Sir William accompanied him, Charlotte took her sister and friend over the house. It was rather small, but well built and convenient. Though she was pleased to see her friend comfortably settled, there was a grief about the whole affair, for Charlotte would not long be able to enjoy her happiness. I wonder if we're gonna behead her now. If it's about to happen, you know. She had already learnt that Lady Catherine was still in the country. It was spoken of again while they were at dinner, when Mr. Collins, joining in, observed, "Yes, Miss Elizabeth, you will have the honour of seeing Lady Catherine de Bourgh on the ensuing Sunday at church, and I need not say you will be delighted with her. Her behaviour to my dear Charlotte is charming. We dine at Rosings twice every week, and are never allowed to walk home. Her ladyship's carriage is regularly ordered for us. I should say one of her ladyship's carriages, for she has several." That's funny, because it's if your friend's a millionaire, you don't have to walk home. Let me just get you a limo. Let me get you my helicopter. Wadi Catherine. Wow, that's a name. W-A-D-I. Oh, never mind. Sorry. This is Charlotte speaking with a labored speech. "Lady Catherine is very respectable, sensible woman," groaned Charlotte, "and most attentive. Neighbor." "Very true, my dear. This is exactly what I say. She is the sort of woman whom one cannot regard with too much deference." Come on, how do you not notice that? As dinner continued in this manner, Elizabeth's eye was continually drawn to Catherine, who hovered over her plate, using a spoon to shovel goose meat and gravy in the general direction of her mouth, with limited success. As she did, one of the sores beneath her eye burst, sending a trickle of bloody pus down her cheek into her mouth. That's disgusting. Apparently she found the flavor agreeable, for it was only increased the frequency of her spoonfuls. Well, I mean, pus is supposed to be sweet, right? Or something, I heard. I don't know. Elizabeth, however, could not help but vomit ever so slightly into her handkerchief. Yeah, like, I'm right there with you, Elizabeth. The rest of the evening was spent chiefly in taking over Hertfordshire news and telling again what they had already been written. When it closed, Elizabeth, in the solitude of her chamber, had to meditate upon Charlotte's worsening condition, and how no one, even Lady Catherine, supposed to be the greatest of all zombie slayers, had noticed it. About the middle of the next day, as she was in her room getting ready for a walk, a sudden noise below seemed to speak the whole house into confusion, and, after listening a moment, she heard somebody running upstairs in a violent hurry and calling loudly after her. Elizabeth grabbed her katana, opened the door, and met Maria in the landing place, who cried out, "Oh, my dear Eliza, pray make haste and come into the dining room, for there is such a sight to be seen. I will not tell you what it is. Make haste and come down this very moment." Maria would tell her nothing more, and down they ran into the dining room, which fronted the lane, in quest of this wonder. It was merely two ladies, stopping in a low carriage at the garden gate. "And is this all?" cried Elizabeth. "I expected at least a dozen unmentionables, and here's nothing but Lady Catherine and her daughter." "My dear," said Maria, quite shocked at the mistake, "it is not Lady Catherine. The old lady is Mrs. Jenkinson, who lives with them. The other is Miss de Bourgh. Only look at her, she is quite a little creature. Who would have thought that she could be so thin and small?" "Wow. She is abominably rude to keep Charlotte out of doors in all this wind. Why does she not come in?" "Oh, Charlotte says she hardly ever does. It is the greatest of favors when Miss de Bourgh comes in." "I like her appearance," said Elizabeth, struck with other ideas. "She looks sickly and cross. Yet, yes, she will do for Mr. Darcy very well. She will make him a very proper wife." Oh, dang. Okay. Mr. Collins and Charlotte were both standing at the gate in conversation with the ladies, and Sir William, to Elizabeth's high diversion, was stationed in the doorway in earnest contemplation of the greatness before him, and constantly bowing whenever Miss de Bourgh looked that way. At length there was nothing more to be said. The ladies drove on, and the others returned into the house. Mr. Collins no sooner saw the two girls than he began to congratulate them on their good fortune, for he informed them that the whole party was asked to dine at Rosings the next day. Apparently overcome with excitement, Charlotte dropped to the ground and began stuffing handfuls of crisp autumn leaves into her mouth. Yeah, that's a little weird. Weird. I don't know. Alright, we're on chapter 29. I'm going to pause it here. I think I'm just going to read for the rest of the day, or as long as I can, maybe. No, I guess, I don't know. We'll see. Well. Until next time, chapter 29. We'll see how long Charlotte lasts. I think it's going to be any time now, but, I think we're almost like halfway down this book. Look at that, almost there. Alrighty. Subscribe if you want. I'm just going to be doing this and then probably moving on to another book. So, subscribe. Bye.